We'll call this meeting to order of the Hollister Planning Commission, regular meeting, November 16th, 2023 at 6:02 p.m. Commissioner Corona, could you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call, please.
Commissioner Ross,
Present.
Chairperson Henderson,
Present.
Commissioner Corona,
Present.
and let the record show that Commissioner Lohr is absent, and then Commissioner Stephen Belong has an excused absence.
Okay, thank you. The verification of agenda posting.
The agenda was posted outside of City Hall on Monday, November 13th, 2023 at 2:53 p.m.
Thank you. So approval of minutes, we have the minutes for October 26th, 2023. Are there any corrections from the commission? The only thing I noticed, I believe it said that our city attorney was remote, but I believe you were present.
Yes, I was here. I was remote the previous meeting.
Okay. Any other corrections? Okay, I make a motion that we approve the minutes with the correction to the attendance for the city attorney.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 3-0. Now we'll move to public input. This is the time for anyone in the audience to speak on any item not on the agenda and within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Speaker cards are available in the lobby and are to be completed and given to the secretary before speaking. When the secretary calls your name, please come to the podium, state your name and city for the record, and speak to the City Planning Commission. If you are joining us by Zoom, please click on the bottom of your screen to raise your hand. If you are joining us by Zoom using a cell phone, please press *9. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes with a maximum of 30 minutes per subject. Please note that state law prohibits the Planning Commission from discussing or taking action on any item not on the agenda. Do we have any speakers?
I do. Carson Clower.
Thank you very much. Carson Clower with K2 Solutions. I've been assisting a applicant on an out-of-jurisdiction sewer service request to the city for a little over a year. I know the city's been working through a bunch of different stuff in terms of policy and other applications that are much larger than ours. Essentially, we have a house on Hillcrest that has an old and undersized septic tank, and they'd like to jump on the city sewer system, which has a line that's directly in front of their house. Like I said, it's been a little over a year to get to this point, which we're not really that much further than when we submitted the application. So I'm just kind of bringing it up because I'd like to, now that some of the big projects have been heard and approved, it'd be nice to get a hearing on this. I know it's not going to come directly to you guys, but it is an application within the planning department. And at some point, depending on the policy put in place by the council, it may have to come to you depending on what they require of the applicant. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any more speakers?
Yes, I do have a speaker online. Give me one moment. Mary Shaw Caron, I'm going to go ahead and promote you. And you have 3 minutes.
Hey. Oh, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've been helping a group. It's called Don't Dump on San Benito. And they have gone to the city council already to ask that the city of Hollister take a position on the landfill expansion because the route that the garbage trucks will take.
Excuse me. We can't hear very good.
Yeah,
Oh,
Mary, there's appears to be some feedback on your mic, or it's fading in and out.
oh, sorry about that. Okay.
That sounds a lot better.
That's a little better.
Is this better? Okay.
Yeah,
Yes,
could
go
you
ahead.
could you just start the time over? Yeah,
Sure.
thank you.
Sorry.
All right.
Sorry about that.
Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, I'll
I've
try.
started your time over now.
Okay, thank you. So I'm helping a group. It's called Don't Dump on San Benito, and I also live in the county. But we are very concerned about the impact of the expansion of John Smith landfill. You know, it's primarily for out-of-county waste. 80% has been from mostly Silicon Valley and other counties. So we feel that since Hollister is greatly impacted, the landfill is pretty close to Hollister city limits on the east side. And also the garbage trucks, there'll be a lot of them traveling. The current proposal is to go down Airline Highway right through, you know, a lot of shopping areas. So we believe that the city really should take a position on this. So the group has already spoken to the city council, but the planning commission could also take this up and make a recommendation to the city council. So I would like to suggest that you folks consider that as an option. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have no other speakers.
Okay, we will close the public input at 6:09. We'll move on to item number 1, public hearing for zoning ordinance amendment 2023-4.
Thank you, Commissioner Henderson. This item is on the draft inclusionary housing program, and we have Greg Goodfellow, our consultant from PlaceWorks, online with us, who will be providing the presentation. Greg, let me just get this started for you, and then you can go ahead.
Thank you so much. Can you all hear me?
We can.
Commissioners, thank you for having me tonight, and thank you for your continued work on this and other aspects of city planning. As Eva mentioned, I'm going to be walking you through the latest draft of the inclusionary housing ordinance. Next slide, please. And again. All right, so first we'll just do a very quick reintroduction and background to inclusionary housing. And then I want to go through the previous direction from elected officials on this item, just to remind you of some of the decisions that were made from the beginning till now and why those happened. And then we'll talk about the current ordinance as it stands. And then, of course, give you a chance to provide feedback, ask questions, etc. Next slide. All right, very quickly. An inclusionary housing ordinance is a set of requirements for the inclusion of affordable housing in all new residential development projects. And more than anything, it establishes a percentage of new market rate developments that need to be allocated to affordable units. It's tailored to local market conditions. And in Hollister, it was proposed by the General Plan Action Committee and moved forward by the City Council to the general plan policy setting process. And I think it's important to point out that, as is the case in all jurisdictions, inclusionary housing is only one tool in a toolbox of affordable housing policies. It will not create all affordable housing needed, but again, it's one tool in the toolbox. Next slide. All right, where did this all start? This all began in 2022 with direction from the last council. And on January 18th in 2022, they laid out their desires for an inclusionary housing ordinance that were quite specific. They wanted this ordinance to apply to all development types, single family and multifamily developments. They didn't offer direction on the minimum project size, but they made it very clear they wanted the ordinance to apply to all tenure types, i.e. both for sale and rental housing. They wanted the ordinance to apply citywide. In some cases, cities like to apply strategic areas to which it applies, downtowns, certain development areas, etc. In this case, the past council wanted it to be citywide. And the inclusionary requirement was established at 20% across both rental and for sale housing. And the council asked that no alternative compliance methods be included in this ordinance. And we'll get a little bit more into what those alternative compliance methods are later on. So what this led into was a draft general plan action, L3.1, exactly, adopt an inclusionary housing ordinance that requires new residential developments to include 20% of units as affordable housing. And the spread of that 20% was proposed as 7% to very low income households, 7% to low income households, and 6% to moderate income households. Next slide.
Greg, I'm just going to interrupt you really quickly to note for the record that Commissioner Lenore has arrived at 6:11 for the record.
Oh, great. Would you like me to start over in any way?
No, please continue.
Okay. So this commission first was introduced to this item on March 23rd of 2023. And what I presented to you was both the results of the financial feasibility analysis as well as the draft ordinance. Now, that draft financial feasibility analysis is required by the state for any proposed inclusionary housing ordinance that requires more than 15% of units for residential households or residential projects. And I stressed at that point, and I'll do so again, unlike most financial feasibility analyses, this wasn't an exploratory analysis to ascertain, feasible requirements. We started with a direction from council at 20%, and therefore had to come up with ways to ensure that projects would be feasible given that 20% requirement. And so I presented to you 5 development prototypes that assumed this 20% requirement. And if you recall, what we found out through some very dense Excel tables was that in order to be feasible with this 20% requirement, the city would need to offer a local density bonus of 56% for sale projects and 15% for rental projects. And again, we put together the ordinance from that, which the basics were at least 7% of units would need to go to very low income households. At least 7% would need to go to very low income or low income households, and at least 6% to very low income, or moderate income households. There would be an in lieu fee option, but only for residential development projects. And of course, we would have this allowable state and local bonus, the local bonus being 56% above the state bonus and 50% above the state bonus for rental projects. And as directed by the council, there were no alternative compliance methods in that draft ordinance. Next slide. Following that meeting, we took this to the council, and as I presented to you, I presented to that council the results of that financial feasibility analysis and the inclusionary housing ordinance consistent with it. I highlighted those required density increases, went through the ordinance. And what did we hear from council at that point in May? Well, first, that 20% requirement, there was concern that it could constrain housing development. It seemed high from the council. The public voiced concern about the resulting density and building form issues that could come from those density increases, going back to that 56% and 15% bonus. What would that mean in terms of height? What would that mean in terms of density? And the city council directed us to go back to the community, host an interactive bilingual community workshop at a location other than City Hall. And in short, there was a 3-1-0 motion to continue the item until we completed that, quote, additional stakeholder community outreach. Next slide. In that vein, on August 3rd, 2023, we put together an inclusionary housing workshop. You'll see that that's the Spanish flyer on the slide for that workshop. It was a virtual and in-person workshop at the Vets Hall. There was live Spanish translation. And the main feedback component of that workshop was an inclusionary housing worksheet that participants could fill out on site in writing or in an online survey or, through Zoom with our Zoom hosts. And what we found was that indeed 20% seemed too high, and that all participants across the board would like a 15% requirement. And they wanted those requirements to be allocated, a higher proportion of those to be allocated to very low income and low income households. Participants were almost completely perfectly split on an in lieu fee option, but they did certainly want to offer alternative compliance options. And they wanted to prioritize on-site affordable housing if possible with those options. There was a concern about clustering of affordable housing in certain areas of the city, and the danger of affordable and economic conditions being clustered in one spot, and lack of equity in terms of that potential off-site housing. Next slide. So we took those results back to the City Council on September 11th at a special meeting. And we reviewed the ordinance as it was previously drafted, as you had seen it before. And we also reviewed the results of that inclusionary housing worksheet that we did with the public. And the council voted on key components of the inclusionary housing ordinance. And what were the results of that? Well, it was in a 5-to-1 motion. The council voted to reduce those requirements from 20% down to 15% and remove those local bonus options that we had in that original draft, that 56% and 15% bonus. In a 5-to-0 motion, they wanted to maintain that 10-unit project minimum. So again, inclusionary housing ordinance would only apply to projects 10 units or more. In a 5-to-0 motion, they wanted to maintain the applicability of the ordinance to both for sale and rental housing projects. In a 5-to-0 motion, it did not want to include an in lieu fee option. And in a 3-to-2 motion, we did want to offer some form of alternative compliance. And again, I'll get into that, what that means. But again, that was the results of that special session of the City Council. Now, after that meeting, we did hear from the BIA with some concerns about legal aspects of the draft ordinance as it was set up. First of all, being section 65850 of the California Code, which provides that IH ordinances that include requirements for rental projects, quote, shall provide alternative means of compliance that may include but are not limited to in lieu fees, land dedication, offsite construction, or acquisition and rehabilitation of existing units. So we wanted to make sure that got in there correctly. And we were also directed to 65589.8, which states that a local government which adopts a requirement that a housing development contain a fixed percentage of affordable units shall permit a developer to satisfy all or a portion of that requirement by constructing rental housing at affordable monthly rents. So again, what this comes down to is that even if you had constructed a market rate project with an inclusionary housing ordinance in place, you can comply with that ordinance by constructing rental housing in your market rate development. So again, we wanted to ensure that that got into the draft ordinance. Next slide. All right, so what does that mean for the current ordinance that you've now seen in your current package? Well, there is a 15% IH requirement across tenure and type. At least 7% need to go to very low income households. At least 5% need to go to either very low income or low income households. And at least 3% to very low income, or moderate income. And again, this reflects that community desire to see the proportions of requirements going towards lower income households. As there was before, there's a 10-unit minimum size for projects, and there is now no in lieu fee option for rental or for sale projects. In that original draft ordinance, you had seen there was an in lieu option for rental development projects. Now there is none. And there are now 2 alternative compliance that were not in the original draft. There is the ability to provide affordable rental units in for sale projects. And these would have to be provided at the same or greater number of very low income, and moderate income rental units per the original IH requirement. And those units have to offer the same number of total bedrooms as would have been offered by the original requirement. Second, there is now the acquisition and rehabilitation of existing units alternative compliance option. Now, in this option, this is a more complex option with more complex requirements, whereby a developer can acquire, as is clear, existing units and rehabilitate them such that they are available to low-income households. Now, in order to do this, that developer has to fund a third-party physical needs assessment, which is a very detailed report of the condition of these existing units, what needs to be done to make them habitable, and how much that would cost. There has to be a third-party site assessment to make sure that that site has no hazardous conditions or no conditions that are dangerous to public health or anything like that. The developer has to offer relocation assurance and assistance to any existing residents of those existing units. And the value of the rehabilitation work has to be equal to or greater than 25% of the value of the existing units, inclusive of land value. And again, that's just a summary of some of the main bullets that need to be involved in this acquisition and rehabilitation of existing units, alternative compliance. Next slide. I did want to give a rundown of some of the options that staff considered in terms of alternative compliance and why they weren't selected. In lieu fees were reviewed, and some of the drawbacks to in lieu fees are that they can't allow developers to avoid building on site. And as we heard from the community, we really wanted to ensure that the most units possible get built on the original site, or that, and this is what's valuable about the acquisition and rehabilitation option, they result in direct construction of units, And we've also found the in lieu fees are often insufficient to cover the cost of the required units. And they are impacted by inflation and the cost and time of the public development process by which units are ultimately constructed using those in lieu fees. So there's a time constraint and impacts of time that go into in lieu fees. We looked at the option to just directly build off-site affordable housing. And this, again, going back to the community and the council's concerns, can stifle economic integration and mixed neighborhoods with all different types of households. And like I said, it's inconsistent with some of the community feedback we heard from Hollister residents. We reviewed the option of land dedication for affordable housing, whereby a developer can dedicate offsite land to the city, limited just to affordable housing. And this can promote pockets of affordable housing in certain areas. And like some of the others, it's an indirect requirement that can result in extended periods of vacant land, whereby that dedicated land for many reasons isn't developed quickly and sits vacant. And that was one of the other reasons that staff looked at and did not select this land dedication option. And I'll point out again, there are also, there are many types of alternative compliance options. The two selected made sense in terms of legal and community conditions. Next slide. I'm going to leave my presentation there, but of course, open this up to discussion and questions.
Okay, first thing, I just want to mention that I received the email from Victor Gomez, which has been printed out and distributed in the chambers.
I did as well.
Okay.
And myself.
As did I.
All right. Thank you for that. So we've heard the presentation. So are there questions from the commission for Mr. Goodfellow?
I have one.
Okay.
And it's on. And my apologies, Chairman, for being tardy. You said up there that
Commissioner Lenore, could I ask you to speak into your mic?
the local bonus, you said it will be eliminated. I mean, we had the 56% density bonus based on the 20% of affordable housing. So what is there not a density bonus when we go down to 15? What am I missing there?
No, there's not a density bonus now, and there's two components to that. One is that when you get down to 15%, there is no need to, as far as law AB 1505, to demonstrate the financial feasibility of the requirement. And the other element of this discussion is that as the allowable densities in the general plan, which are still under discussion, have increased. The need for a bonus has gone down. And so it was the council's decision, and it was also in our IH worksheet from the community in our workshop that to just remove that bonus entirely. And now I want to point out that you are still allowed, a developer is still allowed to apply the state density bonus toward his or her inclusionary housing requirement. And that is written into the ordinance.
Okay, thank you. That's very much clearer for me. I guess I missed it, that they dropped the density bonus on August 3rd. I left a little early and I missed that. So thank you for your clarification.
Sure.
So, Mr. Goodfellow, you mentioned that there's, as you just answered Commissioner Lenore's question, that the density bonus is no longer included in that because it's 15, because the total percentage has been lowered from 20 to 15, that there's no longer a requirement to prove to the state that it's viable. However, has there been any study done that the 15% with no density bonus is viable?
No, not an additional study. And I think, the reason, the idea is that we've now provided that balance of these alternative compliance measures as opposed to just enforcing this 15 or 56% bonus, or excuse me, I shouldn't say enforcing because it's an option, it's a cap, a limited available. And, I'll re-explain again, maybe I didn't do a good job of that. A lot of this came from the community's concern. Well, what happens when a project gets, has to include a 56% bonus? What then happens to?
So another question. So I watched your presentation from March, and because I didn't actually attend that meeting, and you said in that meeting that there was the 20% requirement. I'm trying to understand the original source of the 20% requirement. Did it originally come from the GPAC, or did it come from City Council at the time?
Yeah, it came from City Council at the time. And, as I've tried to really impress each step of the way, what that did was sort of reverse the typical process of this analysis, whereby you would start by doing a financial feasibility analysis to find out what projects can handle, for lack of a better term, in terms of a requirement, and then work with the community. Now, because we were given a mandate from the start to literally, add this action into the general plan of a 20% requirement, that reversed that process, and rather than, look at a financial feasibility analysis in terms of its potential impacts, we dropped that 20% in and then tried to reverse engineer it to make sure projects would be feasible. And in that reverse engineering process, that's where we realized, wow, for these things to be feasible, a developer would really need to increase the density. And so again, it was original direction from the council, who was very solid in that direction, and then working from that. And I think that really impressed upon the council at 2 meetings ago, that, we need to start over. We need to get the community's input. And 15% is, I think it's, 93% of requirements.
Okay, thanks. I had a question about, so when we're figuring out eligibility for inclusionary housing, we use a median income. So could you talk about how the median income is determined, and how often is that evaluated? And also, is there a distribution curve that actually shows the entire population of Hollister, of, so if you have a median, you would, if it's a normal distribution, you're going to see, it's going to look even on both sides, the high side and the low side. But I was curious if the distribution is more of a normal distribution, or is it skewed towards the high or towards the low?
Chairperson Henderson, we do have Jamila Saka, our housing programs coordinator, online. So I don't know if she can speak to the distribution, but I'll let her speak to that. But she can definitely speak to how the median income is kind of assigned to us.
Thank you.
Yes, good evening, Planning Commission. This is Jamila Saka, the Housing Programs Coordinator. That it is a little bit more involved in terms of the distribution. I wouldn't be able to confirm whether, like your question is, requesting if it's skewed more to the higher or lower side. It is a little bit more of an involved process in which we do receive annually an update from the State Housing and Community Development Agency. We usually receive updated area median incomes late spring, early summer. So usually May, June of every single year, we receive the update of our county's area median income. Then from there, that classification or that determination is used for the determination of an affordable price. Partly, and how we define low, very low, and moderate within our ordinance will dictate how we use that area median income most of the time. For an example, let's say we're looking at a moderate income level, we would take the moderate income level for that specific household, and then we would divide that by the number of months. And the state, for instance, their definition for moderate income, or what could be the maximum sales price, is based on 35% of your monthly income. So you would then multiply that by the monthly area median income, and that would be the determination for your maximum affordable price. And then so forth and so forth for the different income levels. It would be based on the definition that we define in our ordinance, and typically that definition is also following a state health and safety code, which dictates what percentage we are looking at when we are analyzing those income levels. I hope that answered the question. I can definitely be able to provide the link to the State Housing and Community Development section where they indicate their methodology for being able to determine the area median income, but they do use census information and federal income information as well.
Okay, thank you. I'll refrain from more questions and allow the rest of the commission to see if you have any other questions.
Mr. Chair, I did have one question. It was stated that 15% is common for the percentage for affordable units. Is the breakdown of 753 similar or consistent with other communities, or is that a new thing that we're doing?
I think most inclusionary housing plans, ordinances do have a breakdown. What we have done with that rolling breakdown, where we say, 7% has to go to very low income, the next to very low or low, and the smaller amount to medium. That is the result of the feedback we heard from both the council and the community to make sure that those lower income households get the higher proportion of units. But it is also an attempt to ensure that there's some flexibility for the developer, when he or she is doing final numbers, that they sort of have a rolling window in which to work. And therefore, you can combine, the income distribution in a certain percentage. So it's accomplishing those two ends, which is, a higher proportion of low income units, but at the same time, flexibility for the developer to make their numbers work.
Yes, and if I might add as well, one other consideration that we wanted to ensure when we were considering that rolling type of distribution was to make sure that our ordinance, by mandating a moderate income, didn't exclude potential future 100% affordable projects, which typically, your kind of chispas, your affordable housing developers, when they're proposing a potential 100% affordable project, they're typically required, because they're getting state bonuses or state tax incentives or other things like that, grant funding, and they're providing to very low and low income is typically what they're applying for or need to provide to gain those, the ability to build those 100% affordable projects. And so we didn't want to force moderate income and potentially limit that type of a project in the future was also part of the concern. So it's moderate or less, low or less, very low or less, which I suppose would include extremely low as well.
Okay, any other questions from the commission regarding the presentation?
I have some questions. So, dropped to 15% and no density bonus. So, and then the moderate income level. So that's just assigned by the state?
Correct. Yes. So the area median income, as Jamila mentioned, is updated annually, and that's something that is assigned, for lack of a better term, by the state. So every year they update and they tell all of the counties. So it's assigned by county. Jamila, correct me if I'm wrong there. And the state says this is the area median income for the county, and then how income levels are calculated is a certain percentage based off of that area median income that's assigned. So you have low, which is, I believe, 50% or less, and then, or very low is 50% or less, low is 50 to 80% of that number, and then moderate income is 80 to 120% of that number. But that number just comes directly from the state.
Oops, sorry. Okay. And then the alternatives, let me see.
If you'd like me to share a slide, I can as well.
Sure, I think it's slide 11.
This one? Or one more?
That one, yes, this one. So provide affordable rental units for sale projects. Does that mean that they have to be rental units, or they could be purchased units?
So they still, developers still could propose, let's say they're proposing a 100% for sale product, maybe a condo project. They could still propose 15% of that to be for sale affordable condos, but this alternative compliance comes from that government code section that was mentioned in the staff report, that those could be, the developer could choose to have them as rental units instead. And that's something that in our rereading of the government code is required. So if they're proposing a for sale project, they certainly don't have to choose to have the affordable component be rental units, but it is something that we do need to offer as an option for them. So you could see a development come through where they're proposing, let's say 85% as a for sale market rate product, and then the 15% affordable is a rental product of some kind.
Okay.
Meeting the other requirements for rental units in the ordinance as well. So there would still be requirements on those rentals for some of the things from the draft ordinance as well. You know, similar size. I think we have a like an 80 or 85% of kind of keeping the same size, keeping a similar type of construction quality, and those types of things would still be required. But instead of the affordable being affordable for sale, they could choose affordable for rent.
Okay. And then, Mr. Goodfellow, you mentioned something about transit resources. You were talking about the density bonus not being viable, and then mentioned something about transit resources. Could you explain a little more about that, please?
Of course. What I was referring to was in our decision about the density bonus, we had talked about what that density bonus might mean in terms of how it plays out in the built environment. We talked about this with the community. And, you know, if a project of a certain allowable density if that density is increased by 56%, the way the building is built is going to change. It's going to have to increase in height is the main point. And it's going to increase, obviously, population in Hollister. If you get, many buildings with a 56% density bonus over what is allowed. And one of the main concerns for the community was, well, can we handle that? If there's a population increase associated with so many new development projects that have this very sizable density increase, we're already in our downtown, we already have a lack of bus options and a lot of, cross-town and through town bus options. Our open spaces are already, they felt, inadequate for the population there. So they asked questions about, how are we going to provide open spaces for this many new people? And so those were just, some of the responses that went into our decision to remove those density bonuses. So really, it went from large projects to the fact that large projects mean more people, and more people need more resources, public resources. And there was a concern that the city would be unable to provide that.
Is that always the case? Because we did have a density bonus on a development that it didn't increase the amount of units. It offered more affordable housing.
Yes. So the way that density bonus works, so outside of the inclusionary ordinance, we still have the recently adopted density bonus ordinance, and that's state density bonus law. So any project and the as drafted, the inclusionary ordinance will allow people to utilize the density bonus for the very low income, because our requirement as proposed by the council's breakdown does require 7% very low income, and the state's minimum for qualification starts at 5% provision of very low income. So you could see development utilizing the density bonus every time under this ordinance, under the state density bonus. What was proposed in the previous ordinance was an additional city incentive. So it was above and beyond the state density bonus. So they could apply for both a density bonus under the state provision, and then the city was offering an additional bonus on top of that to accommodate the feasibility issues that were found in the feasibility analysis, so that they could make a financially feasible project while providing the 20% affordability requirement that was suggested by the city. And so under the vein of your question as to whether they have to utilize the density bonus, they do not. They don't have to use the state bonus, and they would not have to use the city density bonus, but it is something that would have been available to them, both bonuses. And as you have seen, and as you mentioned, Commissioner Ross, sometimes the density bonus request isn't actually a request by the developer to build more units, but they would like a different incentive. They've provided affordable housing, and thus they get a bonus. And while it all is covered under that density bonus law, the bonus that they might ask for might just be different development standards, different setback, an increase in height, a waiver of some other development standards. So you might not see the additional units come out of a development project utilizing the bonus, but you might see the additional units. It's really up to the developer and what they propose, but it's kind of an option that gives them variety, both in the number of units that they can build in total, but also in the standards that you otherwise have adopted in your various ordinances.
Thank you. And then you were speaking about the feasibility. So this is about the feasibility of for the developer. Correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So when we proposed, the previous ordinance had 20%, we were required to prepare a feasibility analysis to show that the ordinance wasn't creating in feasibility, and that's where that bonus came through. We offered more units so that financial feasibility could be achieved by a developer if they propose something under the ordinance. With the reduction, as directed by the council, to 15, as Greg has mentioned, you're no longer required to do a financial feasibility analysis. So we have not reanalyzed this ordinance for financial feasibility, and we're not required to. And we weren't directed to by the council.
And so if it had stayed at 20%, then we would need to do the density bonus.
Yes.
Okay. And then just to clarify, how many people were at this workshop? It looks to me that there were 20 in person and 10 to 15 online.
That sounds correct from my recollection, and I believe it was listed in the memo. I could pull up if you'd like me to, but that sounds correct.
Yeah, I have that. So, and what is our population here, number-wise?
I believe we're about 41,000 as of the 2020 census.
What? For the city of Hollister?
Correct.
No. Maybe 45,000. It's not 41, is it?
I can look, but I looked the other day and I sent an email, and I
Okay.
think it was about
Oh,
41.
you work in it every day.
We need a fact
You
check.
know more than
That was the 2020 census, so that was 3 years ago, and online there was no updated year estimates. So it could be more than that,
Oh,
but
well, I thought it was like 45, so I'm way off.
I just searched it too, and you were correct that it is roughly around 41,000, and that the census was taken in 2020.
Okay, thanks. That's lower than I thought.
And so of our 41,000, there were roughly 35 people at this workshop.
correct.
Okay. Regarding the acquisition and rehabilitation units, how are those identified?
They would,
Yeah,
I
go
mean,
ahead,
the
Jeff.
original selection would be by a developer, but again, ultimately they would be approved by the city based on the results of this detailed physical needs assessment, which would need to be completed by a third party who is also approved by the city. And the results of the site assessment also completed by a third party who would also have to be approved by the city. So the ultimate approval of the site is, need to be taken out of the developer's hands and made, approved by the city only based on these detail analyses by someone other than the developer. And that's laid out in detail in the ordinance.
Okay, and then are those specifically used for, it is for very low income, and moderate income? Okay.
Yes, so those would have to be rehabilitated with units equal to the required inclusionary amount.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes, so you mentioned that the inclusionary housing ordinance is only one tool in the toolbox. What are the other tools?
Well, in the housing element, for example, there are multiple policies of agency coordination, working with local developers in other ways, land use analyses, site assessments. There are multiple land use policy, social policies, interagency coordination policies that have to go into this larger toolbox to provide enough affordable housing. And again, the breakdown of the inclusionary housing ordinance like this into very low, and moderate income allows it to be parallel to that state requirement that Jamila was talking about, whereby the state allots a certain number of affordable housing units that need to be built in each county and then is passed on to each city. And then that the city needs to plan for in its housing element. So the structure of an inclusionary housing program is meant to parallel those state requirements that are handed to each city. But again, those requirements, I'm not sure how familiar you are with them. There are many required units of these various levels of income, and an inclusionary housing program is just one tool that will allow the city to reach those requirements, plan for those requirements. And my sense is that the previous council was perhaps put too much weight on the inclusionary housing ordinance to meet that requirement and to tackle the problem of affordable housing. And I think what you see now is a more tempered ordinance that is more feasible for developers and therefore will make it a better tool.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all for now. Thanks.
Thank you. I have another question for either staff or PlaceWorks. So has there been a comparison study of our inclusionary housing ordinance versus other jurisdictions nearby?
Commissioner, I'm working on the same type of program for the city of Tracy. And so I shouldn't say I've done a comparison between this ordinance and others, but I'm working on a memo for Tracy about the nature and sort of patterns in inclusionary housing ordinances across the state. And with this ordinance and this breakdown and this requirement, it is consistent with inclusionary housing ordinances that are not on coastal California, that are, inward and in San Joaquin Valley, I should say, and in other inland counties. It is consistent with those. I think this is not scientific, but there may be a slight reduction in the requirement down to 12 to 15% in coastal communities. And, I shouldn't speak too scientifically because I have not made this direct comparison, but I guess my summary answer is it is consistent with surrounding inclusionary ordinances.
Okay, I just want to clarify. So you're saying that there has not been a study done, but your assessment through your experience is that they're similar, or the ordinance here is similar to other non-coastal communities.
Yeah, simply in my completion of these ordinances in other places, and reviewing studies just for my own interest, and there are many studies done on inclusionary housing ordinances and their impacts and how they're shaped, and that's my general familiarity with them is yes. Okay, that is the case. But
if somebody in Hollister wanted to go compare, there's nothing to go look at. There's no study. There's no way to make
no, not for this project.
Comparison. No. Okay. And then I think my last question is, where did the original percentage distribution of the very low, and moderate, I forget what it says in this ordinance, 7%. I think it's 7, 7, and 6. Yeah. So where did that originally come from?
Well, it starts from, so we have a 50% requirement. Maybe your immediate response would be, why not 5, 5, and 5 for each one? But we did hear from the council and the community that we wanted to skew that requirement towards very low income and low income, and less towards the moderate income. And so that's where that split you now see is, with that 7% towards the very low income versus the 3% towards the moderate. And again, we provided that sort of rolling overlap to provide some flexibility within that prioritization.
Okay, so you're saying it originated in the community meeting, and then that went to the city council after that meeting, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and they agreed with that percentage.
Yeah, everything you've seen tonight came out of council direction from our original draft.
Yes, Commissioner Lenore.
Yes, that Chairman, that was an outcome of August 3rd. They asked the crowd in the Zoom folks what did they think would be an appropriate split for that, and that's what they came up with.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the first I heard of it. Was on the 3rd.
All right. But it's okay. It's based on common public desire.
Yes.
Okay, got it. I don't have any other questions. Any other questions from the council? Commission? Okay. I have a request. So normally when we have a staff presentation, we're told what the options are going to be.
Oh.
So I think that for the public, it would be good to state that, and then we can move on to the public input.
Yes, of course. So tonight, the staff, or the planning commission, excuse me, has an option to adopt a resolution recommending that the city council approve, this is zoning ordinance amendment 2023-4, which would be to adopt chapter 1736 for the inclusionary housing program, with the draft as presented to the council as part of the staff report and described in this staff report. The second option would be to adopt a resolution recommending that the city council approve a zoning ordinance amendment with any modifications by the planning commission, or you could continue the hearing and provide direction to staff to provide additional information or clarification or any suggestions on the ordinance that would require coming back to you with the ordinance again. And our recommendation tonight is to recommend approval of the revised ordinance as drafted, which is option 1.
All right. Thank you. I think we're ready to move on to the public hearing at 7 p.m. Do we have any speakers?
I do, Chairperson Henderson. The first speaker card I have is Carson Clower.
Good evening again. Carson Clower, K2 Solutions. First of all, I'd like to thank the presenter's candor in his comments. It's a rare thing to actually get someone's opinion and not just whatever they think they should say from outside forces. This is a very important topic. And I think, unfortunately, tonight you are being asked to make a decision with incomplete information. And the reason why I think that is that this was done completely backward. You don't have any data that actually supports recommending this. I'd like to come up here and say, you know what, instead of the numbers you have, do these numbers. But I don't know either, because there isn't a study to actually look at it and say this will work. If you want to decide between restaurants and what you're going to eat, you can go off your gut. You can go off your feeling. If you want to decide what's going to happen to your community and something that's as important as affordable housing, you should have some numbers, and you don't have numbers. The study that was done was unfortunately out of date when it was released in the spring. The numbers were completely different because when they did the study, the market had gone down by $100,000 for your average house. So you start with that, you have a problem. It's not their fault that the study was done that way. It's just what happened to the economy. It's what happened to the market. So I personally don't know how you can make a decision tonight without having data that supports, because whatever you decide is you're just essentially saying, I think this is a good idea. And that's no different than when the community was asked what they thought. They didn't have any data either. So whether it's 35 people or 1,000 people or whatever, nobody has any good data on this. So it's an important thing. I would think you'd want to have some better data. A more particular item is the alternative. It's not going to work. It's just not going to work. You don't have enough units that are fix and flips. That whole builder developer, that's gone. Nobody really does that anymore because the units don't exist. So if you're going to tell people that that's their alternatives to go find these units, it's not going to happen. Second of all, you're actually going to have to evict the family from a unit that they're in to be able to do that. Third of all, in that case, to get a 25% increase in value with the land included, that's just not going to happen. That no one's living in that house if you can get a 25% increase in value, land inclusive. Simple question: how much does it cost to build a house? I work with builders. I work with people who are building houses. A lot of times they don't know until they're done. So if we can sit here and say that someone's going to lose $400,000 on an affordable house and multiply that by the X number, well, we don't really know. So there's just a lot of unknowns here. I'd like to get something put in place because I think it's super important. I don't know if this is the best situation, and there should be more discussion on it. Thank you.
Apparently we have no sound. Thank you, Carson. The next speaker card I have is in the audience as well. Fallon Craig. Greg, excuse me.
Good evening, commissioners. My name's Fallon Gregg. I'm a retired teacher, 30 years with the Hollister School District. And I'm here to voice my opposition for the reduction of the 20% inclusionary housing to the 15%. Hollister is an agricultural community, and we need to provide low-income, very low-income housing for our workers. When a community houses its workers, those workers support the economy of the community where they can live and work. And that's a very positive thing. So again, I oppose the reduction of the 20% down to the 15%. Also, I oppose building outside the city limits. I think first you need to make sure that you've used all available space inside the city limits. An example would be, I know in many large cities now, empty retail space is being repurposed into housing, and we have a very large Kmart building that's been empty for many years with a huge parking lot. And what's the probability of that being repurposed into housing, low-income housing? So I agree with the person who spoke before that I think this needs more thought put into it, and that's what I would like to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we'll go to online. The first speaker online will be Dennis Martin. Dennis, go ahead.
Good evening, Commissioners. Dennis Martin speaking on behalf of BIA Bay Area. BIA has provided to the city an analysis of the impact that this draft inclusionary ordinance would have on residential development. And the number one conclusion is that the draft ordinance would cost so much to comply with that residual land values, that's the price developers can pay for land after all revenue and costs are accounted for, would decrease by over $1 million per acre because of this ordinance alone. Because of this hit to land value, it's probable that the draft ordinance would obstruct home building at a time when the city needs to be ramping up housing because of new state mandates. The city should not make compliance so hard that no housing gets built just to punish developers, because as you can see by our analysis, you're really punishing local landowners and farmers and prospective home buyers and renters. Battered by a tight financing market and rampant construction cost increases, we are already seeing development deals fall out because of fear of what this draft ordinance would do to Hollister's land values and development costs. But don't take our word for it alone. The Commission should seek out more input from local landowners and builders. BIA also provided an analysis that the city's proposed inclusionary housing ordinance would be far out of step with neighboring jurisdictions, and that's in your packet. Just like with its high building permit fees and impact fees, the city would have the most costly and restrictive housing policies in the region. BIA's recommendations and comments could help out a little bit, including affordability levels are now too low. On rental, instead of 753, the city should move to 555 split, or an average mix of affordability target to 65% of median income. This is done regularly in other jurisdictions, and if your consultant was out there working for you, he would be able to bring in these alternatives. On for sale, the split should be 7.5% low, 7.5% moderate, because no one can buy a house at very low income categories. The alternative compliances are too restricted and need more options, like partnerships with nonprofit builders and CHISPA and Eden Housing, land dedication for projects. You already have some affordable housing that's built on land dedication from a project. And echoing Carson Clower, how much opportunity for acquisition and rehab actually exists in Hollister so that a builder could take advantage of that alternative compliance? The fractional unit split is unfair, should be closer to 50-50, not 75-25. And affordable units should be exempt from all impact fees, development service fees, construction taxes, and other exactions that the city may put on a development. It's very important for the city to
Sorry,
maintain
the
some
time's up.
flexibility in implementation.
Sorry, the time's up.
And BIA recommends that
Mr. Martin, the time's up. Any other speakers?
Yes, we do have other speakers online. The next speaker will be Mary Shaw Coram. Go ahead,
Hello,
Mary.
thank you again for the opportunity to speak. I wanted to say that I think that we need more affordable housing. I think it's really not wise to be lowering the affordable housing requirement just to accommodate builders and their profits. You know, this community has been really suffering in terms of having enough affordable housing. I know many people who have actually had to move to Los Banos because they can't even afford to live here. So we're displacing a lot of people with this. I mean, there's a lot of construction of housing, but it's not affordable. People can't even afford to rent in many cases. So I think that we should not be lowering the affordable housing requirement. I think that if it is not profitable for builders to be building the housing that we need in our community, we need to be looking at other models. You know, there are many other countries that have very creative models. I mean, the old model, I think some people have suggested that we re-examine options. I think that's not a bad idea for how we can build more community affordable housing, not relying so much on the private sector and these developers who are really just trying to make a profit off our community. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And the final speaker online, give me one moment, is going to be Victor Gomez. Victor, go ahead.
All right, thank you, folks. And just so you're aware, we can't see any timer on our screen here on Zoom. So thank you, commissioners. Really appreciate your time tonight. This is a tough task. It looks like this is going to be delayed to the future anyway, because it sounds like you folks have quite a bit of questions to move on. First of all, I just want to say I'm a product of affordable housing. I grew up right on the corner of Gonzales and Buena Vista, and I couldn't be more proud of that. Good people come out of affordable housing. But for good people to come out of affordable housing needs to be built. And you're not going to build it at 20%. You're not going to build it at 15% with these these three income levels. That's not going to happen. So if you have an intent of passing this ordinance today, you might as well accompany it with a moratorium, because nothing's going to be built with these numbers. The draft ordinance essentially is an obstruction for new housing. Developers are already bailing on projects. I shared that with you in my email earlier. I've had 3 landowners that have said, "Hey, Victor, your client is leaving." They didn't extend their contract because they saw what was coming with this 15% ordinance at 744, and it's super concerning. So that's really problematic. So I would ask that staff come back with some comparisons, as Commissioner Henderson had indicated. It shouldn't be that hard, right? Put together a spreadsheet, look what other cities are doing, and see what their numbers are. But ask them this question. Don't ask them what their percentages are. Don't ask them what's very low income, what's low. Ask them, what ordinance do you have, and is anybody building anything with it? Because you can have all these ordinances up in the air. Who cares? If nobody's going to build it, why are you even drafting this ordinance, right? On the recommendations, I can concur more with Bay Area BIA. The rental needs to be 555. It needs to be evenly split. And for sale, it definitely cannot include, or should be, a very low percentage of very low, because those houses are going to be very, very cheap. But I would agree with that recommendation of a 7.5, low to moderate, because that's really what's going to allow us to build more affordable housing. Alternate compliance are way too restrictive. So we need partnerships with CHISPA. I love CHISPA. I love their work. I love what they do. I love what CSDC does. We need to add that in there. We need to add land dedication for projects. Even if we don't build, if we could buy the land for CHISPA, why wouldn't that work? Why is that a bad thing? We need to add that in there. And lieu fees, they should be considered for sale units. I know that ship has kind of sailed, but look, it's very, very important. The acquisition of rehab makes no sense. We don't have those kinds of projects. We don't have these dilapidated ghettos in Hollister. I grew up in a rough neighborhood, and you go back to it, and guess what?
Time's
It's
up.
actually not bad, right? It's not
Time's
falling
expired.
apart.
Next speaker.
I have no other speaker cards and no other hands raised. Chairperson Henderson.
Thank you. We'll close the public comment at 7:15. All right, so now is the opportunity for the commission to have a discussion and decide how to move forward. So I will lead. This is a very complex topic. With all due respect to PlaceWorks, I find the information presented is lacking. The fact that there hasn't been a study done on how this ordinance compares with other communities, and all we have is just conjecture, opinion. That's concerning to me for such a major decision as this. So I think just based on that, we're not getting enough information to make a decision. My suggestion, and another thing about the PlaceWorks is there was a community outreach meeting done, but for some reason sounds like it was just the community and PlaceWorks, and there was no representation there from the building community to explain, what it takes to allow houses to actually be built. So I think that was lacking. If I'm not mistaken, I didn't attend the meeting, but based on the report, I didn't see that there was any representation from the builders there. So I think in order to have a viable long-term solution, there needs to be a lot of open dialogue between the community. People in the community have different opinions on how they feel about housing, and I think there needs to be open discussion with the building community as well. And I think there can be a mutual understanding and come to, I think we all have a common goal that we would like to see affordable homes built, but none of us, I don't build homes. I don't know anyone who builds homes, but developers build homes. We should talk to them and get an understanding of how we can create a ordinance that would actually help achieve that goal. So that'll be my initial comment, and I'll open it up to the rest of the commission. Commissioner Lenore.
Okay. A lot of good information tonight, and Commissioner Ross, she's asked some great questions. No, I think we beat this to death already. I'm more concerned about the delaying of adopting a inclusionary housing ordinance because they're bringing them in under the radar, the ones that were considered deemed complete by the planning. And we've had 3 recently. I didn't like that. We missed out on affordable housing right there because we don't have this done yet. Now, 15%. Yeah, 20 was great. As Jim Gillio said, 20 is great, Carol, but it's probably not feasible. And the other thing I was very nervous about, and I made quite a few comments, is I didn't like the density bonus. I'm glad to see that's gone. That would have been disastrous for this community. So the city has acknowledged that. They understand the density bonus isn't the way to go. It's the way to go for developers, but it's not the way to go for this city. Okay. The county is at 15%, and there's no way I want to encourage people to locate in the county because they're at 15 and we're at 20. So that's the other reason for me dropping that. As far as builders, I'm going to reply to the comment there that, not enough information. Well, it seems to me, I've read a few studies in the past, and the developers know exactly what a house is going to cost them. Sure, there's varying factors. There's property Properties goes up, up, up. It's never going to go down, so you're never going to have that scenario. There's also the interest rate that's gone down 3 times recently. So again, like this, I like this. So if you try to just, you can't really nail it down. I'm very comfortable with the 15%. And the reason I don't want 20 is, you're right. That's a tough pencil. That'll never happen. So I had to rethink that. I rethink things, and I think that 15 is a better fit for Hollister because we might actually get some. Now, the split. I might be willing to discuss with this commission. I am willing to discuss with this commission maybe a better split. Now, I don't want to reinvent the wheel, but I was always concerned with the working blue collar here that isn't low income or low income. I want moderate housing because the workers aren't getting any help. So Chispa and South County Housing and CSDC, they've done wonders lately, building that affordable housing out there on Enterprise and such, wonderful. And the senior housing on Line Street, so they have some of them, not enough of the low income. They do get some assistance. So I really don't have a problem with adjusting that percentage to accommodate more of the moderate, not above moderate, moderate. Now, so you have 100 lots and you got a 15% density bonus. That means the developers still get to build 85 units above moderate. You know, we've gone too long with getting nothing. So 15% seems reasonable. I'd like to do this. I would like to make that recommendation to the city council for 15 and see how it goes. That's right. Maybe I don't have all the answers, but I'd like to err on the side of the city residents and require the 15%. You developers, find a way to pencil it because you're not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere. Whatever you say, you're still going to be here. You'll find a way. So that's not going to cut it with me. You still have the state density bonus that allows you exceptions to lot size. I'm not sure about lot size. Yeah, lot size, setbacks, fee discounts, impact fee discounts. I mean, what do you want? We just can't roll over and give you everything. We are working with developers. We have to listen to the residents who are really angry. I have a lot of pressure. I don't sleep most nights. So we have to find a way to do the inclusionary housing that will actually come to fruition. I am not interested in inclusionary housing that never happens. And I hear what they're saying. Maybe the rehab on the rental isn't right. I was a little concerned about displacing a family. That I don't like. So I'm not too sure about that, but I don't like in lieu, and I don't want it set over by itself because you get segregated housing that way. The other thing the community doesn't want. So I'm going to tell you that I will recommend this staff report option number 1, but I'm willing to discuss the percentage. But this needing more information for that and more information for this, I feel like we've gotten the information. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Ross, do you have some comments?
I do. So this is about inclusionary housing. And as you know, I'm a teacher, and we have roughly 3,500 students at the high school. I don't know if any of you know, but there's been an increase of violence on the campus, and I really am seeing the effects of families struggling here. Whether it's that they are unable to afford to buy a home, pay their rent, they're commuting 2 hours away and then 2 hours back each day and not being able to spend time with their families. And then what are these kids supposed to do in that time that they're waiting for their parents to come back? So I just see a really fractured community right now, and I really feel like we need to be focusing on the feasibility of the community over the feasibility of developers. A 20%, I do think that is the minimum that we should be doing. There was, Mr. Martin was explaining that, well, nobody in a very low income can afford to buy a house, so let's not make any for them. I think we are a community and we're here for the community. Today, because I don't know how much you know about the violence that's going on this campus at the high school, but there are a lot of pauses going on and having conversations with the students. And it was very interesting that these students, the first thing they said was stop building homes. And I just really feel that we need to be focusing on, as I said, the feasibility of the community over the feasibility of the developers. So I did like that idea of even looking at other options, even outside of our country. It's okay to be doing things like that. If we are going to be looking at more data and more information and more options, we are a worldwide community. It's good to learn from others. So that's where I'm standing right now.
Thank you. Commissioner Corona, what are your comments?
Well, I'm hearing the numbers of 15% and 20% being bounced around. A lot of it stems on possible splits by 5.5, 7.5, 7.5. I'm willing to discuss that a little bit more on the split. I do like the idea of the 15%. I am still a bit troubled, though, by the lack of data. I would like to see a little bit more info, see some more studies, but I'm open to discussion with the commission to see how we can get this resolved quickly.
Commissioner Lenore.
I just want to remind the folks on this panel that it was the majority of the city council that's recommending the 15%. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. So we'll just do another round here. So Commissioner Ross, you mentioned, so based on your statement, you're correlating violence at the high school to housing. Is that correct?
I am correlating it. Yes, housing. One, there's been an influx of building here and a focus on development without looking at the infrastructure. So community is an infrastructure that does need to be built on as well. And we haven't even talked about all of the other infrastructure that comes into play with all of this influx of people here. Also, somebody was mentioning the average income now is really also being pulled in from Silicon Valley, and so many of our people here are also agricultural workers, and so the disparity is getting much larger. So I see how that impact of people are moving here, but they're also keeping their jobs that are in other locations because we don't have any jobs here for these people to afford to live here. And so I do see that it probably seems very abstract, but as a teacher, it's very clear to me to see the effects of building, increase in population, less time for families to be together, and how that then translates into a community. How do children interact with each other?
Okay, thank you. I don't think there's ever any justification for violence, no matter what your living situation is. So I don't see that as a good correlation. And as far as the 20%, so do you believe if we adopted 20% that projects would actually happen under 20%?
I think under the data that was provided under the first study, then it would.
Okay, so that would require the density bonus, which they've said they're not going to do, or which the city council
Right.
said. So,
And I think then now we're lowering to 15% and then not having any data on that, whether it would require a density bonus or not.
right. Well, I think, yeah, I guess there's no data, but there's no feasibility study because it's not required anymore. That's why.
Right.
Yeah. So whether it is feasible or not, I think we still don't know. We're still guessing.
I don't really care. They don't
Yeah.
want to build them, don't build them. But they're going to build them, and they're going to build them right and affordable like we want. We've gone too long without it. You wanted to talk about the split? I'll go 5-5-5. Again, I'm trying to target the two workers that are driving and working here. And working here, and they're making $80,000 a year, maybe $100,000 a year. They're getting nothing. They get no consideration. So I'd like to adjust that split. I didn't agree with it on August 3rd, so I'll just leave you there too. So I'm still having trouble with the split. It's just not advantageous enough for the moderate. They're getting, it's the middle class, and they're getting squeezed all the hell for everything, and they don't qualify for assistance for anything. There's no discount water, discount PG&E. The middle class plays full bore, and they need help buying a house. Thank you. So I'm gonna say 5-5-5. I don't know if the council's gonna like it, but I'm saying I like it.
Okay, and
If we move forward.
sure.
That's
So, I'll say again, I am still concerned about the lack of data as far as what other jurisdictions are doing, what their ordinance says, and whether things are actually being built. I don't see the point in guessing.
Didn't we have a staff report at a planning commission meeting that talked about other jurisdictions in their inclusionary housing? And doesn't the letter here by the BIA know that it has some comparisons in here with Morgan Hill and Hollister, right? The other thing I don't like is I don't really care to be compared to Morgan Hill. I live in Hollister. I'm on the Hollister Planning Commission, so I want to do what's right for Hollister. Morgan Hill, way different in wage earning. Their low wage over there is the middle over here. It's night and day. They have a lot of money over there. Yeah. We have a little bit of different scenario here and a different demographic. So there is information. Now, you know, I don't care about the 15%. It doesn't require a feasibility study, and that's where I'm standing.
So if we requested a study on the Hollister proposed Hollister ordinance versus other communities, who would do that study and how long would it take?
So if that was the ultimate request of the Planning Commission, that would require a contract amendment with PlaceWorks. Staff would likely recommend continuing to work with PlaceWorks because they've been working on the project and are familiar with it. So it likely would speed up any cost and time associated with preparing that study. But that would be something that the council would have to direct, and then there would be a financial component to that. So I would recommend to the Planning Commission, if that was the desire of the Planning Commission to provide that recommendation to the council, that you do recommend that to the council as opposed to taking that under kind of option 3 of giving staff direction to do that. So we could move forward to the council with your recommendation that they allow staff and direct staff to prepare a study. But it would be something that would likely be prepared by PlaceWorks as a contract amendment if that was ultimately approved by the council.
Eva, could I make a comment?
Sure.
I just wanted to clarify with the commission. You had asked if a study had been done, and I answered no. What I was really trying to say was that there was no discrete deliverable that we were asked to complete in terms of, as identified as a study comparing this to others. But that process of looking at other inclusionary housing ordinances and reviewing best practices for inclusionary housing ordinance, that was entirely built into our process of developing this ordinance. I just wanted to be honest and clear that there was no discrete deliverable, no actual report that we submitted to the city because it was not in our scope of work. But I do think our original financial feasibility analysis has a very lengthy introductory section that goes through the process and common practices. And I just want to clear the air there that I did not mean to imply that we did this in a vacuum, because it really was part of a lengthy process of several public hearings, as I reviewed with you tonight, and looking closely, as we do in all policymaking decisions, at data and surrounding decision making. So it is true that no discrete study was prepared, but it's not true that we prepared this in a vacuum. And I do want you to understand that.
Oh, okay. Thank you for that.
Yes, I would just echo what Greg is saying, that just in the draft language of each section and how staff has prepared the kind of the details, right? You're looking at the bigger policy decisions, the splits, the percentage, what types of alternative compliance options we're going to put in the ordinance. But when staff was reviewing, okay, if we're looking at acquisition or rehabilitation, what do other cities that have this in their ordinance, how do they detail that out? How do other cities detail out how they ensure the quality of the units as compared to the market rates? So the details in the ordinance were definitely driven by our review of other ordinances, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I think I'm willing to give up on the feasibility study.
Well, let me add this.
Yeah.
I feel a little more comfortable.
Sir, I just want to clarify what I just said.
Yeah.
I didn't say the right words.
Oh.
I think I'm willing to drop the study of comparing the different jurisdictions. I think maybe I'm willing to drop that. I just want to make sure I said what I meant to say.
And
so.
I was going to tell you, maybe I'm willing to. I don't want it to be short-sighted.
Yeah.
But I honestly feel pretty comfortable with this and the state density. It's not like they aren't going to get anything. But my point, okay, so you could postpone it a little bit now that we know, and I want clarification from staff. The council did pass the hold on general plan amendments and also the hold on tentative maps that weren't deemed. Can you give me that?
So the council adopted a policy holding, pausing general plan amendments, individual requests by applicants during the general plan update, as well as annexation requests during the general plan update. It is not a pause, and I want to make sure that this is clear. It is not a pause on submittal or processing of development applications that do not involve those things. So you will still see tentative maps, residential, commercial projects proposing, but anything that's proposing something that would require an amendment to the current general plan or would result in a change to the city's limits or sphere of influence or otherwise is not something that you'll see come before you while the general plan update is ongoing.
So it's up to you guys. Do you want to let the ones come in under the radar of tentative maps and such and not have any affordable housing in it? Or do you want to settle a 15% and let's get going on it? And if it doesn't work, then let the council change it. We're planning. They can change it. Nothing is set in stone. Things can always be rescinded, amended. It doesn't have to be set in stone, but I don't like the 3 we just did with only a 5% on one of them. And you've got the west side over there, and they're coming. We need to secure this. I want those units. Better 15 than none. So, but I am happy the council put a hold on general plan amendments, but it's not enough. They really want to, they should just hold all of it. And the developers, you should be careful because you'll get your wish. We'll just stall it out for another year or two, and you won't submit anything. That's not good either. That's not good for you. That's not good for us. So those are things to be considered. Thank you.
I had a follow-up to that. Is that okay?
Go ahead.
So if we did request some other data or any other future studies and have it brought to the city council, and then developers came to us, could we request that they have a higher affordable housing in their development?
You can
proposal?
ask.
Yes, you could always
Always
ask,
ask.
but you cannot require anything that is not an objective requirement of your code on any housing development under current state law. So we can only enforce the objective requirements that we have.
I'm going to add here that Victor Gomez did voluntarily put those 5 units in that one. He did not have to do that. So that's something for, was it 8? Whatever it wasn't required. Yeah. So that was, not all developers aren't bad. You just got to tell them how it is.
All right. So our job as the planning commission is a recommendation body to the city council. I don't think it's, I agree with Commissioner Lenore that we shouldn't do something that's going to delay things. So I think option 3 is not something we should do. Anything that we want, we should do as part of our recommendation to city council and let them decide it, or to either agree with us or not and do what they want to do. And as far as, I asked how much a study would cost to do a comparison of other jurisdictions, and I think Eva, you mentioned that that it's going to have to be another, how do you say it? We'd have to request make another request and another fee, I guess, associated with that.
So definitely for another feasibility analysis prepared by PlaceWorks, but something like a comparison of other ordinances, I think could be gathered relatively quickly. So I will clarify my statement that requesting a feasibility analysis of this ordinance would certainly be something that would take time and have an additional cost.
Okay. Yeah, and I may
but-
keep saying that word feasibility. That's not what I'm meaning to say. I'm meaning to
a
say
comparison analysis is
comparison
something
analysis, yeah.
that we probably already have, as Greg mentioned, in kind of a not formalized way, and could be something that staff and possibly PlaceWorks staff could prepare under the current ordinance.
Yeah, I mean, city council just agreed to another $700K as part of the general
800.
plan, and this inclusionary housing ordinance was I feel like it was kind of thrown in, or it's kind of the same thing. It's actually part of the general plan too, but it's being treated separately for some reason. But I just don't. I think PlaceWorks can just put together a comparison pretty quickly and not expect more money for that.
Well, I want to know.
Yeah.
They don't do things for free.
So
but I mean,
I'd like to know that because, man, that 800 was hard to swallow. Even though I very much believe in it 100%, it was still a tough pill to swallow.
if I may, in the past, when we've had direction from either planning commission or from council on doing more comparative studies, staff has asked for more direction. So it could be that you want to see us compare it to 15, 30. You can direct us to the types of cities that you want, the locations you want. If you have particular places in mind, that is at your discretion to direct staff to do.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I mean, you would compare it to towns around us.
Yeah,
We're not the same
coastal,
as a valley city.
non-coastal.
Yeah.
City.
I think that's what we should strive for.
I agree.
So Commissioner Laura, you mentioned you might consider the 555. So was that just for rental, or was that for rental and sales?
Everything.
Everything.
And like an even split.
Okay.
Again, because the bottom is already getting help, and they're gonna get more help, but the moderate's getting none, and even the low isn't getting much.
Okay. So I think I'm prepared. I think I'm prepared to make a motion on this. So what is the draft resolution number?
It's on this page. The next resolution number is 2023-36.
Okay. So I'd like to make a motion that we adopt a resolution recommending City Council approval of a zoning ordinance amendment to adopt Chapter 17.36 Inclusionary Housing Program with the draft Chapter 17.36 included as Exhibit A with modifications by the Planning Commission of a 555 split of the three tiers, the very low, low, and moderate, and that we request a PlaceWorks to provide a study of other jurisdictions, their municipal code, based on within 50 miles. If we need to specify area, I would say within 50 miles.
I have a question. Is it now appropriate?
So that's my
Motion.
That's my motion.
Does the second come and then the discussion?
We can
Okay.
first.
Yes, you
Got
can.
it backwards?
No, you
Okay.
can, either way would
Okay.
be fine.
No, I forgot my question. Jeez. It'll come to me. So you want to do the 15 with the
Yes.
555? Oh,
Yes.
I think you better call out the resolution number by name as well. I mean the number, because she gave the number, but then you didn't incorporate it into your memo, and I don't want any problems.
Okay. Draft.
Yeah,
Okay. Draft resolution 2023-36
yeah. Or planning, yeah, just so
with
they-
modifications
Yeah.
of the 555. And then also.
I got my question.
Okay.
The fact that we're going to ask for more work, staff will answer this. And if there's more cost, is that not a council call? Can we be asking PlaceWorks to do more work, knowing that it might cost more, or is it not going to cost more?
I think that this analysis is something we can work on and incorporate into our report
Okay,
to the
'cause
council.
I don't want to overstep our boundaries because they have the purse strings and we do not. So if that's the case, I'll second your motion.
Okay. I don't want to.
Anybody. Excuse me. When it's time.
That's fine. So I guess I have a question now about my motion. So I requested a study of other jurisdictions, and I did say PlaceWorks, but are you saying that the Hollister staff can do this instead?
I think
Or
a
they can work
comparison
with-
of ordinances is not something so excessive in its request that it's something that we can do. It's been informally done as part of the preparation of the ordinance, as part of the previous staff reports. I think we could prepare, a spreadsheet or something more formal as part, taking this direction and presenting that to the council for their consideration with your motion, if that's something that you want us to do.
Okay. All right. So I'd just like to clarify my motion that we would like to see a study put together of the inclusionary housing ordinances of other jurisdictions included in staff report to City Council. Okay. So do we still have your second?
Second.
I just wanted, so what are we looking for in that? Are we just looking for numbers? Are we looking for success rate?
Both.
Yeah, all irrelevant.
You were concerned with success rate. I
Yeah.
mean, we want to get down to brass tacks. What's going to work?
And what is success rate? To me, success rate is community and thriving.
Absolutely.
You know, the community is thriving,
And people buying homes that live here already.
right? I mean, the very low income should be able to purchase a home. I look at my students and they don't feel like this is much of home anymore. And I'd like for them to be able to see this as home, see a future. My concern is I do want to go back to the 20%. So,
Okay.
Okay. Are we ready to take a vote? Okay, roll call vote.
Sorry, taking notes. Commissioner Ross,
nay.
Chairperson Henderson,
Yes.
Commissioner Corona,
Yes.
Commissioner Lenore.
Aye.
Motion carries 3-1 with Commissioner Ross dissenting.
Okay. So on the agenda, we have no new business. We have no old business, and no study session items. Do we have any reports from the planning department?
I do have a few things that I'd like to just inform the Planning Commission about. The Planning Commission Academy, which is put on by the California League of Cities, the registration was opened for the 2024 Academy. That will take place March 6th to 8th in Long Beach. And there is funding available in the Planning Division training budget for the Planning Commissioners to attend. So I'll have my team ensure that you are all provided with additional information about that, and we can coordinate with any of you who might be interested in attending that Planning Commissioner Academy. And then I also wanted to report that there will be a joint study session with the Planning Commission and the City Council on December 4th, starting at 6 p.m. So it'll be on the same day as the regular council meeting on the 4th, but it'll start ahead of that, and it'll be a study session on the housing element, the six-cycle housing element.
What
And
time? What time?
It'll begin at 6 p.m.
Okay.
here in the chambers, and more information will be provided when that agenda is posted, such as the hybrid Zoom link and those types of things. And then the last thing that I wanted to report, just because I was reminded in the discussion, for the 1550 San Juan project that we talked about with the 5% very low, I just wanted to present to the Planning Commission so you knew that when that went to the council, the density bonus request, it was modified. So they'll be providing 10% low income. So you're doubling the number of units. They'll be available at low income rents as opposed to 5% at very low. So there was a change to that, just to report to you all, but the density bonus was otherwise approved by the council. And I have no other report.
Okay. Moving on to Planning Commission reports. Any reports from the commission? Commissioner Lenore.
Yeah, I do have a report. I have a report on this. And I'm not going to talk politics right now. I'm only going to talk to you because I'm here to talk to you. So the comment was made that the effort to change the rules to allow for more growth was recommended by Mayor Mia Casey's Planning Commissioner Carol Lenore. I did it all by myself. During a special Planning Commission meeting, Commissioner Carol Lenore indicated that it was time to allow for much more growth around the city, and the efforts to try to slow growth by the previous council was hurting the city. The previous council was not of slow growth, and I should know because I was on there. As she talked about needing more houses to be built around Buena Vista Road, she said, "Show me something better than ag land right there." No, show me something that's better than fallow ag land that the property owners and the farmers were insisting they could not farm there. There's too much environmental impact when they're trying to abut residential. That didn't come from me. That came from folks in the audience. I do not run this planning commission. I work with my colleagues up here. We vote the way we vote. I never insist. I make my vote and my recommendation known. In case you've all not noticed, I have a reason for what I do, and I state it in a public meeting. I respect my other colleagues on here, and you'll notice that I always say, and I especially did in that meeting, that was my opinion. They vote their heart and their study, and I vote mine. I vote my heart, and I vote my research. And I'm proud to work with this planning commission up here. Thank you, Mayor.
What were you reading from?
It's a hit piece that came in the mail today, and I have a nice picture on here.
Okay.
They actually got a good picture of me, so I don't really care. This is garbage. We're doing right. And Commissioner Ross, I so appreciate your comments. I really do. Even though we might disagree, I understand. Thank you.
Okay. Any other reports from the commission?
I just wanted to share. Is this a time I could also just share some? Okay. So the November 4th, I believe, or 5th, we had the altars on San Benito. I don't know if anybody went to that, but it was our first annual Dia de los Muertos event.
I did.
Yes.
Awesome.
So, and we're planning to do it every year.
That's cool.
And my students built altars for the local businesses, and it just was such a wonderful thing. I talk about community and building community and providing these students with this opportunity of a real world experience of having a client and meeting their needs and building that relationship. And they got to actually go out and canvass the businesses and let them know the reason that it would help them as students, but also help the businesses, letting them know about economic growth. And so it just was such a wonderful experience. And there's so many performances and arts and crafts.
It was awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. Just very happy.
Let your kids know that I cried when my son had to move because they couldn't afford anything to buy here. The son that I love dearly is in Rio Linda, and I would have loved him to stay here. So that's why I work hard to get the lower echelon some housing. I really feel bad, and I don't like to have sad kids, but a lot of people are affected by the unaffordable situation here. And I'm a native, and my kid couldn't even live here. The other one doesn't have a house either. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just like to say I really appreciate this everyone on this commission, and I really enjoy working with you all, and I think we work together well. Mm-hmm. And I'm proud to be a part of this. I've never done this before. I was wondering how I would like to request something be on the agenda for the future. Is this the right time to do that?
Yes, and then you would just, we would ask for consensus from the commission and add that to the next agenda.
Okay.
Or a future agenda.
Okay. So there was an article in Bonito Link, I believe it came out today, talking about the county has an ADU program.
Oh, yeah. They're working on it.
Yeah. So what I would like
Plans.
to propose an agenda item is a report from staff on the status of our ADU program. And included in that, I would like to know. So one of the things that the article said was that the county ADUs cannot be done in Hollister or San Juan Bautista because of zoning differences.
I didn't get that, and they all work under the same building code, but whatever.
Yeah,
I don't quite understand that. The zoning might be an issue, but it's all under the, what is it, California? It's not the uniform building code anymore. What is it?
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt because
Okay.
I consulted your bylaws just to make sure that was accurate, because what I told you was how the city council adds items to the agenda, but in your bylaws, any one commissioner can add an item to the agenda, so it wouldn't require consensus.
Okay. So I would like to have included in the report a discussion about the county program and why what they've done can't be used here, and also if somehow I don't know how far the city is along in the ADU program, but I would like to know if it would make sense to somehow leverage what they've done.
They drew plans. They provided plans for people to use.
Yeah.
And I thought we would have been there by now, so I'm waiting for that as well.
Yeah. So that would be my request.
Oh, my God.
Just to make sure I captured everything, because I do think I heard something and then missed another thing. So a report on the status of our pre-designed ADU program, reviewing the article in Bonito Link. I haven't seen it, so I'll review it. Oh, that was the thing I didn't write down. Information about San Benito County's program and why we might not be able to use theirs, and just can we leverage their plans? Did I capture everything?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, perfect.
I had also for discussion. You can just talk about this internally, but I believe when a building is left vacant for 12 months, the signage needs to come down. So I'd really like the Kmart stuff to come off. It's just up there, and it really by law should have been down already. So, did you get an answer on the landscaping all around the frontage of Safeway? I still want to know what they're going to do there. If you could work on that too and bring me some that you contacted them and they're to put the landscape back per their conditions of approval. Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Lenore, we are looking
Okay.
into the records. Our older records are paper, as you're aware, but they are also kind of all over the place, up on the hill in boxes, and so we are doing research on
I bet I
trying
can
to
find it. I knew
Your
I could
files
find
were
it.
organized, but they were
Yeah,
moved,
you guys
so
threw 'em
they're
here,
not
threw 'em there,
organized
threw 'em
anymore.
Here, you thrashed them, and now you can't find anything.
Yep, no, it wasn't planning stuff, but they were moved, and so
Not good.
finding files is a difficult thing. So
Those
we
were
are
my babies, and you scattered them everywhere.
we are looking for
Thank you.
information on Safeway. So I'll get back to you
Okay.
when we have that information.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other reports from the commission?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to report, if I could, on October 31st, myself, Commissioner Belong, as well as Commissioner Lenore, served as judges for the Hollister Downtown Trick or Treat event, judging the booths. It was really great to see how much community involvement was down there.
Oh.
It was actually to the point where when I got home, I had 0 trick or treaters because they were all downtown. And it was neat to see all the kids. Just the costumes were great.
What a treat to have these guys outside of the planning commission. It was really fun. I totally enjoyed it. Man, the city's got it going on for the special events. And I know there's a lot of organizations involved in that. I just got to tell you, I'm really proud of the downtown area. It was a blast with Stephen and Luke doing that. Yeah, very nice. We had a good time.
That's awesome. Okay. If we have no further reports from the commission, we are ready to adjourn at 8:04. This meeting is adjourned.
I had a lot of fun with you guys.